In the summer of 1944, German military intelligence received an extraordinary report that would fundamentally alter how they understood American technological capabilities. An intact American fighter aircraft had been captured near Abbeville, France, after an emergency landing by an American pilot who had suffered engine damage. The aircraft was a North American P-51 Mustang, the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world at that time. The aircraft was undamaged by enemy fire. The aircraft was mechanically complete and functional. All systems remained operational. German military engineers were ordered to begin immediate and comprehensive analysis of every system, every component, every design feature of this revolutionary machine. The technical team assembled at Rechlin-Lärz airfield included Germany's most experienced aircraft engineers and designers. These were men who had spent years studying American and British aviation technology and comparing it to German developments. These were men with decades of combined experience in aircraft design, aeronautical engineering, structural analysis, and systems integration. These men understood that what they were looking at would be absolutely critical to German air defense strategy and future fighter development. The moment they began their examination, they realized they were confronting something far more revolutionary than previous American designs. The first comprehensive measurements revealed dimensions that seemed almost impossible for a single-engine fighter aircraft to possess. The wingspan extended 37 feet from wingtip to wingtip, providing exceptional lift generation and load-carrying capacity. The fuselage length was 32 feet, providing room for fuel and advanced systems that German fighters lacked. The fuselage itself was narrow, elegantly proportioned, and aerodynamically refined in ways that suggested advanced wind tunnel testing and computational analysis. German engineers took precise measurements of every dimension. Every inch was documented in technical drawings. Every angle was calculated and recorded. The construction was all metal, utilizing advanced riveting techniques and structural design principles. The design showed advanced aeronautical knowledge that seemed decades ahead of German understanding. The design demonstrated access to material resources and manufacturing capabilities that Germany could no longer match. The engine installation was revolutionary in its sophistication. A Packard Rolls-Royce Merlin V12 liquid-cooled engine powered the aircraft, producing approximately 1,695 horsepower in the late-model variants. The engine's supercharging system was sophisticated, featuring two-stage supercharging that maintained engine performance at extreme altitudes. The cooling system was remarkably efficient, utilizing advanced radiator design and ducting that German engineers had not yet conceived. The engine installation demonstrated engineering excellence that German designers immediately recognized as superior to their own developments. German engineers compared this to their own fighter engines with considerable frustration. Germany's Daimler-Benz DB605 engine produced about 1,650 horsepower, but consumed more fuel than the Merlin. The German engine demonstrated worse reliability characteristics. The German engine required constant maintenance and suffered frequent mechanical failures that American engines seemed to avoid. The fuel system of the P-51 Mustang revealed a staggering American industrial capacity and resource availability. External fuel tanks could be attached under the wings and fuselage, dramatically extending the aircraft's operational range far beyond any German fighter. These tanks utilized advanced fuel transfer systems and pressurization equipment to maintain stability during flight. A fully loaded P-51D Mustang could reach operational ranges exceeding 1,600 miles, an almost unimaginable distance for a fighter aircraft. This range meant American fighters could accompany heavy bombers all the way to Berlin and back without requiring refueling. This range meant no German city was safe from fighter escort protection. This range meant escort fighters could protect bomber formations for entire mission profiles, from initial penetration of German airspace through target run and return to England. German analysis calculated the implications immediately and with considerable despair. The P-51D had a maximum speed of 440 miles per hour at altitude, exceeding the speed of most German fighters in operational service. The service ceiling reached 41,900 feet, allowing the P-51 P-51 to fight at altitudes where German fighters struggled and suffered engine performance degradation. These specifications meant the P-51D could fight effectively at altitudes where most German fighters began experiencing serious performance limitations. These specifications meant the P-51D could escape from German interceptors by climbing to thin air where German fighters could not follow effectively and where the thin atmosphere prevented sustained combat. The armament system astonished German engineers when they examined the weapon bays and examined technical specifications. 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns were mounted in the wings, a revolutionary arrangement providing concentrated firepower. This was 6 times more firepower than many German fighters carried in standard configuration. Each machine gun fired at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, an extraordinarily high rate for sustained combat. Concentrated fire from all 6 weapons produced devastating results, capable of shredding other aircraft with minimal exposure to return fire. German fighters typically carried just 2 cannon and 2 machine guns, a configuration that seemed almost medieval in comparison. The firepower advantage belonged entirely to the American aircraft, providing American pilots with massive advantages in head-to-head engagements. The wing design represented advanced aeronautical science that German designers had theorized about but never successfully implemented. Low-drag laminar-flow wings were extraordinarily rare in 1944, with only the most advanced aircraft featuring such designs. German fighter designers had not achieved this level of aerodynamic refinement despite years of development effort. The wing design reduced fuel consumption dramatically compared to conventional wing designs. The wing reduced engine strain by requiring less power to maintain flight at given speeds. The wing contributed substantially to the aircraft's exceptional range and endurance characteristics. German engineers recognized that this represented advanced knowledge of aeronautical physics and wind tunnel testing techniques. The airframe construction used aluminum alloys of exceptional quality that Germany could no longer produce in sufficient quantities. German aircraft production faced constant material shortages and had to make do with inferior aluminum alloys. American aircraft production seemed limitless in comparison, with unlimited access to high-quality materials. American factories produced aircraft by the thousands every single month, each one equipped with the finest materials available. German factories struggled desperately to maintain even minimal production levels despite maximum effort from German industrial managers. The contrast between American and German industrial capacity was devastating to German leadership when confronted with clear evidence. German test pilot Major Klaus Kellen, a highly experienced combat veteran with hundreds of combat hours, was ordered to evaluate the captured P-51D in comparative testing against German fighters. Kellen was an experienced pilot with deep knowledge of every German fighter in production. Kellen had flown every German fighter type in operational service and understood their performance characteristics completely. Kellen was absolutely qualified to judge aircraft performance at the highest levels of professional competence. Kellen reviewed the P-51 specifications carefully and shook his head in defeat. Kellen told his commanders frankly that German fighters could not compete effectively against this aircraft at altitude, particularly in sustained combat. The analysis room at Rechlin-Lärz airfield filled with diagrams, calculations, and technical drawings as engineers worked to understand every aspect of the American design. Engineers plotted performance curves comparing the P-51 to German fighters in various flight regimes and configurations. Engineers compared German fighter capabilities against the P-51D comprehensively in various flight regimes, including level flight, climb, dive, and turning performance. At sea level, German fighters were reasonably competitive with the P-51 in specific performance metrics. At 15,000 feet, the P-51D began demonstrating substantial performance advantages over German fighters. Above 20,000 feet, the P-51D demonstrated clear dominance over German fighters in most performance areas. Above 30,000 feet, German fighters were essentially helpless in direct comparison to the P-51D. German intelligence reports detailed the complete history of the P-51 P-51 Mustang development based on captured technical documentation and pilot interviews. The aircraft had been introduced in 1943 with an Allison engine and demonstrated inferior high-altitude performance compared to contemporary German fighters. In 1944, the revolutionary Merlin engine version appeared, transforming the aircraft completely. This version could fight effectively at any altitude where air combat typically occurred over Europe. This version could reach Berlin from English bases and return without refueling stops. This version could protect bomber formations over the heartland of Germany, ensuring bomber crew survival. This version had changed the air war fundamentally and irreversibly in favor of the Allies. German commanders understood the implications immediately despite their initial disbelief. Daytime bombing raids over Germany, which had been terribly costly to American bombers in 1943, with casualty rates exceeding 50%, had become sustainable and survivable in 1944 because of the P-51 Mustang. Bomber crews who would have died in unescorted formations in 1943 were now surviving multiple missions with P-51 protection. American industrial capacity could replace aircraft lost in combat and train new replacement pilots continuously. German fighter force could not replace experienced pilots who were killed or damaged aircraft that were destroyed. This fundamental imbalance favored American strategic bombing operations increasingly. The captured P-51 was flown in German markings for extensive comparative testing against German fighters in direct combat scenarios. German pilots flew the P-51 alongside German fighters to gain direct comparative experience. The results confirmed every fear expressed by German technical analysts. The P-51 could outrun German fighters in level flight at all altitudes tested. The P-51 could outclimb German fighters in standard climb performance at all altitudes. The P-51 could outturn many German fighters at altitude where aerodynamic advantages became decisive. The P-51 had superior visibility from the cockpit for situational awareness. The P-51 had more comfortable seating arrangements for long-endurance missions beyond 4 hours. German fighter force command records show that after technical analysis of the P-51 was completed, commanders began implementing tactical doctrine changes. Fighters were ordered to avoid head-to-head combat with American P-51 escorts whenever possible unless tactical advantage was overwhelming. Fighters were ordered to attack bomber formations when escorts were engaged elsewhere or when tactical advantage from altitude or numbers existed. Direct combat with P-51s was actively discouraged in operational orders because such engagement usually resulted in German losses. German pilots were instructed explicitly that survival and preservation of fighter force was more important than achieving air-to-air victories when facing multiple P-51s. The technical reports written by German engineers concluded definitively that American aircraft manufacturing had achieved technological superiority that Germany could not overcome through design innovation alone. The reports noted explicitly that even if Germany designed a demonstrably superior fighter aircraft, production capacity did not exist to build sufficient numbers before the war ended. The reports recommended radical focus on defensive measures and ground-based air defense rather than continued fighter development that could not be produced in adequate quantities. The reports essentially conceded that air superiority had been lost through American technological superiority combined with unlimited production capacity. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring reportedly received the comprehensive P-51 analysis report personally and reviewed all technical findings directly. Göring had claimed repeatedly and publicly that any American bombing of Berlin was impossible. The detailed technical analysis of the P-51 Mustang forced Göring to confront reality that contradicted his public pronouncements. American fighters were indeed protecting bomber formations successfully. American bombers were indeed reaching German cities with increasing regularity. American air superiority was indeed achievable through superior aircraft design and production. Göring's response alternated between denial and desperate demands for new wonder weapons that did not exist and could not be developed before the war ended. German fighter pilot records show increasing demoralization and psychological defeat after extensive encounters with P-51s in combat over German territory. Experienced German pilots reported consistently that tactics developed against earlier American fighters did not work against P-51s. Experienced German pilots reported that American pilots flying P-51s seemed to possess better training and significantly more flying experience than German pilots. Experienced German pilots requested transfer to other military branches or ground duty when possible rather than continue flying against overwhelming odds. The psychological impact of P-51 superiority on German fighter force morale was devastating. The P-51 Mustang had fundamentally turned the air war by mid-1944. When the P-51 arrived in European skies in sufficient numbers in 1944, German air superiority in daylight combat became mathematically impossible to maintain. German fighter force could no longer prevent American bombers from reaching strategic targets. German fighter force could no longer protect German cities and industrial targets from American air attacks. German fighter force could only inflict casualties on American bombing formations, never achieve prevention or meaningful defense. The strategic bombing campaign accelerated accordingly as German defensive capability collapsed. German military-industrial capacity began focusing desperately on Me-262 jet fighters as a potential solution to the P-51 problem and American air superiority. Jets could potentially fly faster than the P-51 Mustang. Jets could potentially climb faster and achieve altitude advantage. Jets could potentially achieve superior performance at high altitudes. But jets appeared far too late in the war. Jets were produced in insufficient numbers to influence air superiority status. Jets required scarce aviation fuel and extensively trained test pilots. The war ended before jet fighters could change fundamental air superiority status. German reconnaissance aircraft fitted with advanced cameras would occasionally encounter P-51s over Germany during photo reconnaissance missions. Photo reconnaissance missions that had been dangerous but feasible in 1943 became nearly suicidal in 1944 with P-51 patrols. American fighters could climb to reconnaissance altitudes and intercept slower reconnaissance aircraft effectively. German pilots reported that escape was only possible through speed dives toward the ground where P-51s could not follow safely due to structural limitations. The analysis of the captured P-51 Mustang became a symbol of American technological superiority throughout German military establishment. German engineers could understand the design principles and recognize the engineering excellence. German engineers could recognize what advanced aeronautical knowledge had produced this achievement. German engineers could copy certain individual features in isolation. But German industry could not produce aircraft in the quantities needed for air superiority. German industry could not produce aircraft with the reliability and quality of the P-51. German industry could not match American production capacity or pilot training systems. German industry could not overcome the fundamental disadvantage. By 1945, every German fighter pilot in operational service knew about the P-51 Mustang and understood its capabilities intimately. Every German pilot understood that encounters with P-51s usually resulted in German losses and death. Every German pilot knew that individual pilot skill mattered far less than aircraft performance advantage. The P-51 represented not just a superior aircraft, but American industrial, technical, and strategic superiority that could not be overcome through pilot courage or tactical skill alone. German military archives after the war revealed how profoundly the captured P-51 analysis had affected strategic planning and military decision-making. Reports recommended accepting air superiority loss as inevitable and focusing resources on ground defense instead. Reports recommended producing defensive weapons against bombers rather than continued fighter aircraft development. Reports acknowledged explicitly that the air war had been lost when the P-51 Mustang achieved full operational capability in sufficient numbers. The captured P-51 Mustang sits today in museums and historical displays as evidence of American technological superiority. Technical drawings and comprehensive analysis reports survive in German military archives. Engineer reports document German recognition of American superiority with devastating clarity. Pilot reports document German pilot understanding that the war had been lost in the air. The P-51 Mustang changed World War II through superior aircraft design, unlimited production capacity, and strategic employment of fighter escort. Hermann Göring's famous post-war quote acknowledged this reality with brutal honesty. Göring reportedly said that when he saw American Mustangs flying over Berlin in escort formations, he knew the war was completely lost. The P-51 Mustang had made long-range bomber escort possible and practical. The P-51 Mustang had made strategic bombing campaigns sustainable against German air defense. The P-51 Mustang had ensured American air superiority over Germany. The P-51 Mustang had contributed directly and decisively to Allied victory in Europe. German military historians after the war confirmed that the P-51 Mustang represented a technological turning point in aerial warfare. The aircraft's unique combination of speed, range, altitude performance, and armament could not be matched by any German fighter in production or development. German industry could not build competing aircraft in sufficient numbers, even if designs existed. German pilots could not overcome aircraft performance disadvantages through tactical skill or superior training. The air war was decided fundamentally by the P-51 Mustang's appearance in 1944 in sufficient operational numbers. American bomber crews understood immediately the implications of P-51 Mustang escort protection for mission survivability. Bomber crews that had suffered 50% casualty rates in unescorted formations in 1943 now flew with dedicated P-51 protection. P-51 pilots learned to recognize bomber formation patterns and intercept German fighters before they could attack effectively. P-51 pilots became ruthlessly effective at protecting bomber formations and achieving air superiority. German fighter losses increased dramatically when facing coordinated P-51 escort tactics. German pilot losses increased as experienced pilots were killed. German fighter force gradually degraded through casualties and critical lack of experienced replacement pilots. The P-51 Mustang's exceptional long range allowed escort fighters to follow heavy bombers deep into German territory and provide continuous protection where previous escort aircraft could not reach. Bombers that had been forced to turn back before reaching deep into the Reich could now complete long-range missions to distant industrial targets. Industrial targets deep within Germany that had seemed beyond reach of fighter escort became vulnerable to sustained bombing. German radar warning systems became nearly useless because P-51s arrived so quickly after bomber formations penetrated German airspace. German control systems could not coordinate effective fighter interception when response time was compressed. German air defense system commanders realized they needed fundamental tactical doctrine changes to cope with P-51 escort superiority. Single fighter engagements became less effective and too costly. Mass fighter attacks became necessary, but concentrated fighter groups remained vulnerable to P-51 top cover positions. German controllers struggled desperately to achieve tactical concentration while maintaining defense of other threatened sectors. Resources became increasingly stretched and inadequate. German fighter production could not replace aircraft losses. German fighter force gradually declined as experience and equipment disadvantage combined into decisive superiority. The technical superiority of the P-51 Mustang manifested in every single combat engagement over Germany. German pilots reported consistently that P-51s seemed to appear suddenly from high altitude with substantial speed advantage. German pilots reported that escape required diving toward the ground in hopes that P-51s would not follow to minimize structural stress. German pilots reported that head-to-head combat favored the P-51 unless the German pilot could achieve a tactical advantage through surprise or numerical superiority. As the war progressed, such advantages became increasingly rare and difficult to achieve. By 1945, German fighter force had become essentially defeated as an organized air defense asset. Remaining aircraft were used primarily for defensive missions against bombing formations. Remaining pilots were either very young recruits with minimal training or very experienced veteran pilots who had somehow managed to survive 4 years of intensive air combat. German fighter victories continued throughout 1945, but at tremendous cost in aircraft and pilot lives. Each German fighter lost could not be replaced. Each pilot killed represented irreplaceable combat experience and organizational knowledge. The P-51 Mustang became symbolic of American air superiority globally, not just over Germany. P-51s served effectively in the Pacific theater as well. P-51s flew long-range missions in the Pacific and achieved similar dominance over Japanese fighter aircraft. American aircraft production ensured sufficient P-51s for all theaters simultaneously. German and Japanese production could not match American production rates in any aircraft category. American industrial capacity simply overwhelmed Axis production completely. German military analysis confirmed definitively that the P-51 represented not temporary superiority, but fundamental technological and industrial advantage. German designers could not produce a fighter aircraft that combined the P-51's range, speed, altitude performance, and armament. Even if German designers could theoretically create such an aircraft, production capacity did not exist to begin manufacturing until 1945 or 1946. The war would be over by then. Germany had lost the air war in strategic terms when the P-51 Mustang achieved full operational capability. German civilian population experienced direct consequences of P-51 superiority in their daily lives. With American Escort fighters protecting bomber formations, daylight bombing raids increased in frequency and intensity. German cities were bombed repeatedly and systematically. German civilians suffered increasing casualties for bombing. German war production faced constant disruption from bombing attacks. German morale declined as it became clear that German fighter force could not prevent bombing raids. The P-51 Mustang had made German air defense effectively impossible to maintain. German military leadership faced the reality documented comprehensively in captured P-51 analysis reports. Air superiority had been lost completely. Strategic bombing could not be prevented or significantly impeded. German cities would be bombed repeatedly. German war production would be disrupted continuously. German civilian morale would collapse. Germany could not win the air war. Germany could not win the overall war. The P-51 Mustang represented not just a superior aircraft, but the physical manifestation of American industrial and technological superiority that made German defeat inevitable and unavoidable.